Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
and Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. All right, welcome back to episode 142 of the Freight 360 podcast. Ben, how you doing today?
Doing pretty well. Weather's beautiful. It's going to rain this afternoon, so the humidity's not too bad. Pretty nice.
Orchard Park, we've been blessed with some nice, warm, bright, sunny weather recently, but thunderstorms are rolling through today, so it's going to cool down. So it's funny too. So my wife and I are going to be moving later in the summer, and I was like, oh no, do we have to change the intro? But nope, I'm still going to be living in Orchard Park, just in a different neighborhood. So all is good there. Still going to be living in the same town as the Bills, just a couple miles further away from the stadium. So
super exciting, though.
What's that?
It's exciting, though. Moving into a new house.
Yeah. I would definitely have outgrown where I live now 2 kids later. So a dog and 2 kids later. So, but hey, we got an awesome packed episode today. We're talking double brokering. It's happening. It's hot right now. We're going to go through all the myths, the truths, the questions that people have. We're going to break it down, and we're going to talk about what it is, how you can do the best you can to prevent it, vetting tools and things like that. So, but first, welcome back to Freight 360. If you're brand new here, you happen to tune in at a really, really good episode. So keep sharing us with your friends. Leave that 5-star review. It helps us rank good on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you're listening to your great podcast. So quick sports update here tonight, which we recorded on Wednesdays. So 2 days from now when you hear this, you'll know the results. But tonight is the match. Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes.
Your
versus
boy
Tom
and Patrick
Brady
Mahomes.
and Aaron
Who do you like?
I think Rodgers is probably the most dominant golfer, but the format, it's a 12-hole shamble. I don't know if you're familiar with this. So they picked 12 holes on the course in Vegas, and I think it's the Wynn whatever course. So here's how they do it though. Both twosomes. So everyone drives, right? Everyone tees off, and then each twosome has to pick which drive they want to use, and then they play basically the best shot.
Best ball scramble.
They play out their ball all the way to the hole. So it's kind of a mix of like best ball and a scramble. So yeah, they pick the best drive, and then they both have to go in, and it's match play then. So a point if you win the hole, or you half it. So you get a half point if you split it if it's tied. So, but it's the best score from Josh and Pat, and the best score of Tom and Aaron. So,
Who'd you put your money on?
I haven't yet. We still got like 2.5 hours before. I'm gonna take Josh Allen. Obviously, they're like, I think it's like plus 140, so they're the underdog. But it's a charity. It's a fundraiser, so it's not like these guys are gonna go out there and like they're not playing in an NFL game right now.
Right.
They're out there having fun. Like, who knows? And
they've always been entertaining. All of them that I've ever seen. Like, they're just shit talking. It's like you're playing golf with a bunch of your buddies. Like, it really does kind of get that feel, which I think is pretty cool.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to it. We can report the turnout next week. So I did get up to speed on NHL. Wait, you got something else on golf?
Yeah, in golf, actually. Shout out my little cousin, Darren Kowalski, is going to be playing in the final Open qualifier on Monday at Kinsale.
Ooh.
I think there's about 100 and some people in the field. They're expecting, I think, 15. So if he's in top 15, he'll play in the U.S. Open. And he's actually, this is really cool. They play in threesomes. He's going to be playing with Martin Laird, 4-time PGA winner. Guy won the Shriners last year, I think. Luke Donald's going to be playing there. I mean, it's just pretty cool to see. Like, my little cousin's going to be on the range with I don't know, a handful of and there's 2 or 3 major winners in the field. Like, it's going to be pretty cool. I'm really excited for him. Zach Johnson's awesome. Going to be playing.
Dude, that's pretty sweet. Nice. NHL, they're in the conference finals, just started off this week, and then NBA is in the finals, Golden State versus the Celtics. So again, I don't really have I don't really care on either one, but I'm sure there's people out there that listen that maybe they love Steph Curry, or maybe they love the Celtics, or maybe they're an Avalanche fan or Oilers. I don't. Hey, go team, whoever it is. I like to watch finals of anything. So if there's if it gets to game whatever in the best of 7 in either of those NHL or NBA, I will watch any tournament or championship deciding game to just because it's good sports. So
yeah,
but yeah, that's your sports recap. Let's give a shout out to our friends over at DAT, and then we'll get into double brokering.
Taking the guesswork out of freight with DAT. The DAT Load Board Network is the largest on-demand freight marketplace in North America, connecting freight brokers with available capacity on any lane. Grow your business with tools that allow you to find new business partners, and you can quickly qualify and onboard new carriers. And with the industry's leading freight rate data, you can make clear and confident pricing decisions. Check out the show notes for 30 days of free of Power, Express, or Trucker's Edge.
Absolutely. All right, so double brokering, and as a side note here, there is a link in the show notes. There's a nice article from Carrier 411, written by one of the TIA folks. Really good, that breaks down double brokering. If you do some Googling too, there's like Freight Rave's had a lot of good articles on it. They've talked with some of the big players like DAT and whatnot to discuss double brokering in the last year, because it has gotten out of control, and it costs millions and millions of dollars a year to brokers out there and carriers that get burned in these schemes. So I'm putting together a dispatch checklist for my company, Pierce Worldwide, that I work for. We're going to also have it available to Freight 360 folks. We'll get it up on our website here in the next couple of weeks. We're just putting the finishing touches on it. So let's talk, what is double brokering and some of the different things that we see here. So a typical transaction, a shipper tenders a load to a freight broker. The freight broker will contract a trucking company to haul that load. And that's it, right? Now, double brokering, in a nutshell, is when the freight broker contracts a truck, and then, to no one's transparent understanding or knowledge, that truck or that trucking company doesn't actually haul the load. They secretly hire another trucking company to haul that load for them. So there's a lot of issues here, and I think the biggest risk for the broker, and again, read the Carrier 411 article that's in the show notes here. Think about stuff like this, right? You're as a freight broker, you have lost control of that load. You don't know what trucking company has been actually hired to haul it. You haven't been able to vet their insurance or vet them through a bunch of carrier vetting tools to know if they have the right safety standards, how long they've been in business, if they have the right equipment type that your customer requires. You also don't have physical, the ability to physically track that truck. Because if, let's say you had, you wanted to do GPS tracking, and you sent a request out to the carrier you thought was hauling it, and they might give you a million excuses as to why it's not working. You have no idea where that load's at. So further on top of that, now you're paying a carrier that you think is hauling that load, but you have no idea if are they going to follow through and then pay the actual truck that hired it. So it puts brokers in a really, really bad position. So that's that is.
But let's clearly state that too, right? Because, and I think that's the part that, like, for listeners out there. So, a normal transaction, shipper, your first party, gives a load to a broker books the truck moves it. The way the law follows is the vehicle that loaded that freight, when it hits their truck, they have to be paid. Like, that's the way the law follows, right?
They can even go all the way back to the shipper if the broker, gets in a dispute over it.
Right. And that's exactly it, right? So, like, the law follows the person that moved it. The company that owned it, that needed it moved, money has to get from them to the person that actually moved it. In a normal transaction, they have an agreement with a broker. We have an agreement with a carrier. We make sure they have the same requirements the shipper needs, right insurance, all of the right protocol, whatever their procurement requirements are. They move it, we get paid, we pay them. Now, in the double brokering side, that's where, we get the load from our shipper, we post the load up, and, a carrier calls us, and we vet that carrier, and they look like a reputable carrier. But then, unbeknownst to us, they don't tell us, and they then either hand that load to another person maybe in the same building that has a brokerage license, or maybe they just illegally book a truck on it and don't tell anybody. But the point remains is where that load goes after it, we don't know. So our communication stops with the person we thought was moving it. Now, again, going back, like the law follows that the person that ultimately moved the freight needs to be paid. So where companies get burned is, hey, my shipper knows the load was picked up and it was delivered. So from their point of view, they seem like everything's fine. I'm the broker. I got paid when the load was delivered, or they sent me, I invoiced them, whatnot. I pay the party I thought moved it. Well, where the fraud happens oftentimes is the person the broker paid that double brokered the load, they just keep the money and then they never pay the carrier.
Yep.
And they just literally retain all of the profit. So what happens is, and this happened to somebody I know recently, we talked about this. If that company just goes MIA, folds, keeps the money, spends the money, does whatever, you as the broker, you still owe that carrier money, the carrier that actually moved it, because the shipper paid you. It's your responsibility to pay the person that actually moved it. And if you didn't, and you paid somebody that ran away with your money, if that carrier comes back, the one that actually moved it, to your shipper, the shipper's going to look right back at you and go, you got to pay them. That's your responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's where you end up.
If you don't, and they try to go after the shipper, you just lost a customer. So
exactly.
Let me break down the intent, because there's a bunch of different reasons people do this, and methodologies, but there's two real big ways that I think companies double broker and their intended course of action. So one is total fraud, and one is to just not get caught but continue to do it. So total fraud is what you just outlined. Carrier gets a load from broker, and carrier double brokers it to another carrier, and then just expects to receive their payment and never pay that money. And they only have about a 30-day window, or maybe a little bit longer, to run an operation like that before they're going to get totally busted. And that's why you see these double brokering schemes. These companies, they just pop around. It's like playing whack-a-mole. You just constantly trying to find these carriers, report them, get them on a double broker list, and blacklist them and all that. But they pop up and they shut down and they reopen up under a different company so quickly that they just keep doing it over and over and over. I read something on it today that we hear Glendale, California. That typical Southern California area is where a lot of these operations have happened out of. There was a stat that there was more new carrier authorities set up on a single street in Glendale than people or than houses that live there. That's how quickly they're registering 10, 12, 20 different authorities, and they're going to go through one, boom, shut it down. Go to the next one, boom, shut it down. Now, I read a thing today that talked about they would intentionally hire foreigners from Armenia or just random places over in Eastern Europe or Southeast or Southwest Asia, and they would pay them really, really low commission, hey, I don't know, whatever. They pay them just a little bit of money, hey, get as many of these double brokers as you can, and I'll pay you X amount of money for it. And the money to them as foreigners, it was wow, I can do this, and this is great money. I'll never make this kind of money back home. So it's it's a legitimate scam that these people do, knowing that, hey, I can make a quick buck doing it, and then they're on to the next company.
Well, and to go further on that, right? Yeah, and I talked to somebody this morning that had opened an office overseas, and some of the people they hired had formerly worked for some of these companies, right? And now they're doing business the right way, they're doing it ethically, but they were just talking about how prevalent some of these companies are overseas, and it's exactly what you said. The exchange rate, money wise, is so different that they can pay such little money related to dollars, right? I think the analogy, it was less than that. It was 10. It was less than that. It was the dollar equivalent compared to what that country was a 10-fold exchange rate. So they were basically paying them the equivalent in US dollars of like 10 or 15 bucks. But to them, it was like, $100 or $200 per shipment. So you've got people very incentivized to just double broker as many loads as they can, get paid. They don't care. There's no relationships there.
Yeah.
The company's going to fold it and turn into a new company in 45 days, and they're going to give them a new company that they're working under.
So that's your total fraud. Now you have the other side, which is where a legitimate trucking company intends to double broker and just not get caught. They're still planning to pay the bills, right? But they want to stay long-term in operation. So let's say they've got 6 trucks, but they took 10 loads, and the intent is we'll put it as much as we can on our own trucks, and then we're gonna double broker the rest and just hope that we don't get caught. And it's a way for us to increase our business without having to go out there and add more trucks or go find shippers directly. We're just going to take loads off the boards or from a broker and just try to get away with it as long as we can. I literally had this happen, or there might be the instance where they thought they had a truck and they didn't. So instead of falling off the load and giving it back to the broker, they just double brokered it. And I had that happen last week. A guy, one of my agents, he's like, it was like first time dealing with a double broker situation, and he's like, what do I do? What do I do? And I told him, I was like, don't go at him all hostile. Go at him with compassion and just like, hey, man, I just wanted to clarify something. I know this load got delivered, but my customer said it was a different truck that showed up, and we're just trying to figure out, did you guys have like a sister company or something? And, we had this other carrier calling us saying that they thought they were hauling our load, but it came from you. Like, we're just trying to get everything settled. And the guy totally admitted, he's like, yeah, I was going to be hauling it for you, and my truck had to go into the shop, so our dispatcher ended up just, I thought he gave it to another one of our drivers, but apparently he just hired another company to do it, so we didn't, disappoint you. And it's like, he just admitted to double brokering right there. So, and a lot of times maybe they don't, that's not their intent from day one, but they're dishonest enough or lacking just enough integrity to still go through with that, and it's double brokering. We lost visibility on it. Luckily, they still we caught it, and we just said we're not going to pay you guys because you didn't haul it. We're just going to pay this other company directly, and we're not going to work with you anymore. And they understood and they moved on. So it's like the intent behind it isn't always malicious, but the second that they go through and take that action, you should treat it all the exact same way, right? Mm-hmm. So, it's bad.
And I will say, though, that there are companies that do that above board, and they do it honestly, and they're upfront about it. There are asset companies that have sister brokerages, and in their contracts it states, hey, you're paying for this asset, under certain circumstances, we may need to broker this load through this company. And, they're above board, and they do that. And they do that in a way so that they can, maintain a certain level of service. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the dishonesty, the intentionally saying something and doing something completely different. Telling them you're hauling the load and then giving it to a truck. Because again, that's where our liability falls as a broker. It's our job to make sure the truck we send meets the requirements of our customer. And if somebody else is sending it and you don't know that, then you genuinely don't even know if the job was done correctly. Whether they had insurance at all. Whether if something happened, anything would be covered or anything. You have no clue.
Absolutely. And that brings me to the next part is the legality. And this is where I want to go through co-brokering, right? They're not the same. So co-brokering, broker gives load to another broker knowing that they are going to put it on a truck and that we're not the one putting it on a truck. But there's contracts in place. Our customer is okay with it. Us and the other broker are okay with it. And we're going to require that second broker to meet all the same criteria for a carrier that we would have. And I want to read this blurb from the Carrier 411 article because there is some benefit to co-brokering if it's done properly. So it says, some brokers have developed niches that other brokers can use to their advantage in better servicing their customers. Some of these niches include border crossing, bonded freight, working with hazardous materials or dangerous goods, oversized equipment, and local contracts. So think about that. The whole point here is to service the customer properly. So the customer might love working with me and my brokerage, but they have a need that I'm not specialized in, but I know that I can rely on this other brokerage that has a strong carrier network in like they mentioned oversized, right? Let's say I don't have a ton of oversized carriers or hazmat carriers per se in my carrier network. So instead of me going out there and just trying to hunt some random carrier and set them up that I've never worked with before, I can set up a co-brokerage agreement. My customer knows that, hey, for this, I'm going to leverage this other third-party logistics firm that I'm contracted with, and they have a really good network of carriers. So, we're going to work together in conjunction with this. And hey, everyone knows about it, and we're servicing the customer in a very, very good, healthy way, right? That is co-brokering, and it's very, very effective when done the right way.
I've done a lot of that in my career. When I worked at a bigger box brokerage, I did a lot of co-brokering. One of my largest contracts, I would say, is co-brokered. The one with Crowley in the military. They were a broker. They're a 3PL. We provided additional support with them. We had a co-brokerage agreement for the military contract. But also that I'd learned, working in the big companies, they all have co-brokerage agreements. Like the TQLs, the CHs, the Coyotes, the Integrities. There is someone in every one of those companies that has the other large company as a customer, and there's a co-brokerage agreement because, even it doesn't matter what size you're in this industry. Even at the largest size, there are trucks that don't work with you. There are trucks that only work with certain carriers or certain brokerages. And these large companies have such commitments to their customers that they need the capacity of some of the other brokers. So, it's very common for all of the large companies to co-broker with some of the other large ones for their larger customers, right? The ones that these customers are so big that no one company could supply all the transportation. The military is a good one. Walmart's another great one. A lot of these companies, the USPS, right? They all tend to work with other 3PLs. But again, it's an above board stated agreement where all of the same regulations and all of the same things are being upheld through it. There's no Chinese wall where nobody knows what's on the other side and everybody's on one side.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, when it comes to co-brokering, we do co-brokering so there's broker A and broker B. Broker A is the broker that gives the load to broker B. If you're in broker B's position, you have the most control because you're selecting that truck. Okay, that's why you will see brokers that work with other transportation companies, and it's more advantageous to be broker B than broker A in a lot of circumstances. Now, the flip side. I'm broker A in an LTL co-brokerage situation. So I can go to an LTL brokerage, co-broker them, have a contract in place, and I can leverage their LTL carriers and their LTL rates in a way that I would never be able to do for our customers myself. And that allows us, and we have a very small amount of LTL that we do at Pierce, but by getting with a large LTL brokerage and having that contract in place, our brokers can service their customers in a way that they couldn't otherwise do if we didn't have that in place. Because we can't, as it stands now, we can't get the LTL rates directly that these other massive LTL brokerages can. So that's an example of being broker A versus broker B. And I want to talk legality here. So co-brokering, if the contract is in place and everyone's aware of it, it is a legal transaction and you're good to go. The TIA has a sample co-broker agreements in place are available on their website or for members. You can check those out. A lot of you, if you work at a bigger company, they likely have their own version of it. Now, double brokering, there's a lot of discussion about, well, is it technically illegal if I'm a broker / carrier and it's the same authority, blah, blah, blah. I read a really good article, and I've gone back and forth on saying, well, sometimes it's illegal and sometimes it's technically not, but it's frowned upon. DAT came right out and said, they did a big study on it, said even if you're not technically breaking a DOT law or an FMCSA regulation, you're likely breaking some state or federal law in the form of wire fraud or it could be a number of things. There's likely some law that you did illegally. If you have the transfer of money for a service that is not the service that you said it was for, they try to do catch-all net with wire fraud, right? So I'm just gonna say it's illegal.
Well,
you
and that's the thing is,
on that. Tell me I'm wrong, but that's what I'm saying.
And the other side of this too, to get a little in the weeds, I remember really getting into some of our contracts when I was at the bigger company because I just had access to them and got to spend a lot of time with legal. And what you really saw in them was most of these agreements between the shippers and the broker, or the shippers and the carriers, always with the shippers and the carriers I had seen this, was it specifically stated that that load and what they were paying for was the truck from that trucking company, right? So in your example, like the contract would like state like the loads are to be moved on assets owned by Pierce, right? Pierce Worldwide. And that's what the attorneys like kind of walk me through, and they're like this is the part that they're in breach of when they double broker it. And that's why there's a big risk, because if a carrier does that and just hands it to their brokerage department, right? They're in breach of that clause in that contract. And if something does go wrong and someone else sends in a truck, doesn't have the right insurance or whatever, that's what protects the shipper from the liability, which leaves the liability right on the broker, right? So to your point, maybe you're not in, violating a DOT or FMCSA law, but like you're definitely in breach of that agreement and the terms of the agreement. And, those are done on state by state basis, I think, but still like you're not in the clear just because you're not in violation of a DOT or FMCSA.
Yep, 100%. It's kind of the same thing, like, not to talk about non-competes, but let's say you have a non-compete and you go work for another brokerage. It's not illegal for you. You're not committing a crime by going to work for another brokerage, but you are in violation of a contract that you signed. So that's where you're going to face your legal issues. So now let's talk about, some carrier vetting tools that you can use on a regular basis. And these are strong recommendations, especially as double brokering has gotten more prevalent, of what you can do. And the first one I want to mention is, and this has been floating around for the last couple of years, there's a double brokering like Excel list. And I can't remember exactly who's publishing it, but it's got a couple thousand MC numbers on there of folks that have been confirmed to have committed double brokering from brokers ourselves, right? We've fallen victim to it. We've reported them. They get on this list, and I can't remember where that list or who manages it or whatever. But someone started it like 2 years ago. I think
it was just a person at a brokerage, if I remember. Yeah, I think it was just somebody that had been compiling it in California and then just started sharing it, and then it just.
Yep. So if you can find that list, I'm pretty much giving you advice and not telling you how to do it, but there is a list out there. But there's also, you can have internal tracking inside of your own company, right? So if you work at a big company that has thousands of brokers, there's probably a way to see if that carrier has been marked as someone that had double brokered in the past. And likely, if that's the case, they're probably already blacklisted or do not use or whatever, do not load in your TMS. Now, first-time carrier, you're not sure. There are tools like, let's say, for example, Carrier 411. You can go on there and see, if they have negative reports on them. TIA Watchdog. You can see if there's any negative watchdog reports on them for double brokering. DAT, Google, right? Anywhere that you can get a report, if something smells fishy and you go through your normal vetting process, right, you want to make sure that check through all those things. The other thing, too, FMCSA's standard data that goes out to a lot of your carrier onboarding tools like Carrier Watch. So you can see number of trucks on there, right? So let's say someone has one truck, but they're trying to take 3 loads from you this week.
Always check that.
It's impossible. But that's just, some people, they don't think to look at how many trucks does this company have, and you have one truck, you're based out of Glendale, California, and you're going to take 4 loads from me this week that are all, multi-day loads. It's impossible.
Different places in the country.
they're going to double broker. So those are some of the things to look at. What do you typically, outside of what I just mentioned, is there anything that you're using outside of those?
No, I use the same things you do, and the other one I use is I just started using. It's the one you've been using for a while, Kevin Hill's product. Yeah, Carrier List.
Yes, they're really good because they even have the insight in there of his product's really good. We have like their pro version, which has like unlimited users and all that stuff, but I think it's like $500 a month, and you can just check carriers out, but you can run lanes and get carrier suggestions and all that. But one of the things that does on a carrier's rating, it'll give an insight, and it'll say, this trucking company's address is a house, residential house. There's no terminal here.
No terminal, no yard.
By the way, there are 4 brokerage MCs also registered to the same address, like red flag, right? So that's a really cool one. And they just released that one this year with that functionality to it. So I really like that one.
Well, and here's the thing. I think, obviously when you're starting out, you don't want to be buying every tool that's available. You're, working to get the profitability. You don't want to overspend. But I mean, as soon as you've got some like viable business, like these are, I think, like must-haves. I mean, the ability to vet your carriers, whether you're using, like I've used my carrier packets with, carrier lists, all of the ones that you've mentioned, you should have at least one as soon as humanly possible, because like it's just such a large exposure, and it really does have the ability to pretty much bankrupt any small company, and even some like larger companies. I mean, it's a pretty big risk.
Yep. It could be, this could be one. Think about this: one load, double brokered, claim involved, carrier doesn't have insurance, the double broker company folds. Yeah, you're left sitting there, right?
Yeah,
you could be held financially responsible or lose your biggest customer, and that one transaction costs you your entire business. So
that's the other thing. I think a lot of people, don't necessarily like think about it is like, how risky is your book of business? If you got 10 customers, all your business coming from 1, 2, 80% of it coming from 1 or 2. Now imagine if one of those loads was double brokered and something goes wrong and you lose that, right? Like, and that's why I don't necessarily think that everybody spends time thinking about how inherently risky their portfolio of customers is. But almost all freight brokerages are like this. You make a lot of your profit from a smaller number of your customers. And that's why this risk has such larger implications if you do get jammed up and you end up in a situation like this.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely. So let's turn to the, we talked through the dispatching checklist in the past. I'm going to pull up what we went through here just as a refresher. So basic stuff, and we're going to drill down the double broker items on here, things that'll help prevent that. But the stuff that we talked through on a previous episode and that we've talked about in our content for a while, pickup information like the address, date, time, does it require an appointment? Same thing with the delivery and any stops. Freight information, commodity, trailer type, does it require PPE, tarp straps, yada, yada. Carriers pay and extra payment, stuff like that. But now, here's the items that are like really, really good to help you prevent double brokering, right? You want driver's name, cell phone, email, tractor number, trailer number, a secondary name and phone number for the dispatcher for that company. Maybe you want the color of their truck, the make and model of their truck, anything on the side of the trailer that is easily identifiable, so you can give your customer a heads up. Hey, they're going to be pulling in there with a bright orange 53-foot dry van, right?
That's my favorite one.
And if you ask these questions, like, hey, you start asking these questions to someone that intends to double broker, you let them know, like, hey, my customer at the shipper, they're going to check to verify the MC number on the side of the truck and the truck and trailer number, the color, yada, yada. Yeah, you've just eliminated like 95% of the...
And you'll hear it too. Like, you'll hear the pace and the tone of the conversation change when you ask that, if they are. Like, when you just go, hey, it's the same thing. I'm in the same habit. I go through the same things, like driver name, tractor, trailer, email, phone number. Hey, real quick, what the side of his vehicle, what color's his truck, and is there any even just the make is good. My shipper's just a real sticker like this. He always asks me to send over at least the color of the make or model so he can differentiate who's coming in. You'll hear them pause, hesitate, start hiccuping. I don't really know which truck I'm gonna send. It might let me just give you a call back in a minute, or hold on one sec. Like, you'll hear it, like, because again, like, they have no idea which truck's coming. And if that genuinely does happen, they know that they're going to go through a whole bunch of work to post this load up, find another truck, and then to have them be rejected at the end of the day. They're not going to go through that work. That's their risk. So you're basically calling their bluff.
Yep, and you did it, the way you explained it was good. Like, hey, my customer is kind of specific about this stuff. You could even say, hey, they're trying to improve their efficiency with getting shipments or with getting trucks in and out of there a lot faster.
And this is a high priority shipment. I want him to prioritize what color's his truck so I can make sure he keeps an eye out for it.
Yep, exactly. Those little things right there will deter. I'm just going to say, I'm going to throw it out there like 95%. You'll probably still get some that will just lie to you and tell you and
hope.
But here's what you can do, right? If you still have an inkling, you can ask your shipper if they've got, if they have the free time to do this, which hopefully they do, just for a quick minute. Hey, just want to make sure, is this the MC on the side of the truck that showed up there? I want to make sure that we've got full visibility on this for you guys, blah, blah, blah. And you could have someone on the dock just go verify, yep, that's the right one. Or no, actually another one showed up here. Because you might have time. I've had instances where the customer calls the broker and says, hey, you told me this was going to show up, but we had a different company come here and pick up this load for us and it got loaded out. And now you're like, what? Like, they found the double brokering, and now you look like
incompetent.
What? Exactly. So
the other thing is, and we didn't really talk about this, but I think it's worth pointing out. I mean, which loads do you think are the ones that are most often double brokered? But it's worth pointing out.
Well, I will tell you that the time when double brokering happens, I think most often is going to be close to holidays. It's kind of the same thing. It's when people have their guard down a little bit and they're more susceptible to fraud. And the same thing happens with fuel advance fraud, usually like around holidays and stuff like that. What have you seen types of loads? These are probably the ones that are easiest to get your hands on?
No, it's the ones where I've got the most money in them. So, like, if I've got a difficult lane for a shipper, and let's say there's not a lot of trucks in that area, but, like, my customer needs it to go, and the rate's $5,000, and I tell them, like, look, if it's got to go today, I need $6,500. I'll buy you a truck. And as soon as you start, and especially if you're posting up the money, because you got a difficult lane and you need to draw attention to it, those were the ones that I would always catch most people trying to double broker it. If I'm willing to pay $6,000 in a $5,000 lane because I need it covered in a half an hour, 40 minutes before the dock leaves, like, you will get an influx of calls. And when you ask these questions, you'll be able to see pretty quickly that they're double brokering it.
I'm gonna challenge you on that. I'm gonna agree with what you just said, but I'm gonna add my caveat. The companies that fully intend to be fraudulent and not ever pay that carrier, I would tell you that it's probably the ones that are easiest to get your hands on and are easy lanes to cover. Whereas if they intended to double broker or just not get caught and run that as part of their business operation, yes. Like the one that happened last week that I mentioned, it was it's one of the agents that has a lot of money in his customers' freight. And he's like, man, they hired a truck for like $300 less than I was paying them. They made $300. They were going to make $300 off of this double broker. I'm like, that's exactly why people do that. And But here's I think the fully fraudulent ones, like the Glendale schemes. Right. It's like a lot of like your lumber, building materials, where it's like big load lists. They're heavy lanes. You can get it. Because they can say they're going to pay a ton of money to a carrier.
Yeah.
They find a truck and then they just never pay them. Yep. Right. So that's my caveat there. I'll say we're both right.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. And the only reason I pointed that out was like I would also get jammed up because like the first time I didn't want to say I got burned, but like what happened was I booked a broker, right, who told me he like was going to send his own truck. And they said they could get him there in an hour. And then they didn't show up. And I'm like, well, I like overpaid for this. Why in the world would this guy not show up? And like we found out the next day, like, well, what happened was, yeah, he was trying to make like $800 off of my load to book a cheaper truck. Well, what happened? He didn't get the truck. So I ended up with somebody I thought was on their way and nobody ended up showing up. And I ended up looking incompetent because again, I didn't say like I fell victim to it, but I did. I booked somebody on it that was misrepresenting them and saying they were going to send a truck and they were really just going to rebroker the load. And I would always see it like on the Friday afternoons, the fallouts, the stuff that needs recovered because it needs delivered by Monday. Like when you're paying on the higher end of the market, again, you're more inclined to get the people that are going to double broker it and pick up your load. They're not necessarily just going to not pay somebody. Like, but just things to keep an eye out for.
Yep. Good stuff. That's our discussion on double brokering today. I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Lean Solutions Group before we get into our fairly beefy Q&A. We got 4 questions today, but hey, if you're in the market for hiring right now, and obviously the Great Resignation has left a lot of folks looking to hire folks in their company, Lean Solutions Group has Lean Staffing, one of their 4 divisions that will assist with putting bodies in seats. They've got trained professionals in their offices in Colombia, South America, that are trained and proficient in the transportation and freight brokerage workforce or workplace and industry, and you can go through an interview and selection process with them and get these folks up and running a lot faster than you would had you just hired somebody off the street. So check them out at leangroup.com to learn more about their staffing opportunities. We're going to have Trey on next week to talk about Lean and some of the stuff that's going on, and so stay tuned for that one. So that is next week, right? That is next week.
I believe it is.
All right.
We got Q&A.
4 questions. First one, ironically, how can I simplify the carrier onboarding process? I don't want to pay for Carrier 411 or SaferWatch. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, you better be paying for or using something that's going to give you this information, because otherwise you're going to end up, you might save a little bit of money right now, and you'll end up getting nipped in the butt for thousands of dollars down the road, and you'll wish you had paid for it. So FMCSA is free to do company snapshots and verify authority and safety stuff and all that. If you can pay for at least one additional software or service that gives you insights in addition to that data, I would highly recommend it. Reporting any negative activity that's been listed on them, like freight guards or watchdog reports. What do you think?
The other thing is, like, it's not even really possible to run a brokerage without that being automated, like the carrier onboarding. Like, and I say this from experience and like working with clients that are doing this by themselves. As soon as you get some loads, like a handful of loads a week, it just bogs you down onboarding carriers, because what happens is you're onboarding carriers, they don't necessarily pick up the load. You might onboard 2 or 3 carriers sometimes to cover a load. That takes so much time. And then like, you're not getting to prospecting. Like, I just don't feel like it's worth the money you save. And again, like, if, the couple $100 is really going to put you behind, like, maybe it's not the most opportune time to jump into just running a whole business. Like, if you can't get the tools you need and you don't have enough budgeted or the ability to like put this on a credit card for a few months, a 0 interest credit card. If you're running a business, you're going to need some of these tools. To me, this is like as important as a TMS and a load board, because again, it's so prevalent, fraud, and just, it's everywhere.
Must have. I'm going to call it a must have.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're, you can get one product that does a lot of this for you.
Yes.
And you don't have to have all 10, there's probably 15 or 20 different services out there that will all claim to do the best at this, at this carrier vetting and monitoring thing. But
bare bones, you pointed out a couple of them anyway. FMCSA, the number of trucks versus the number of loads they're taking. You look at their out of service percentage. I mean,
look at their authority.
Look at
how
their
long
authority.
Have they been in business? Mm-hmm. Are they located in Southern California? Yeah. No. But that's real stuff. So, next question. How should we share visibility of our customers and loads within our company when we have multiple brokers? Okay, this is a good one. I think it depends on how you're structured. If let's say you have an agent-based or a branch-based model where everyone's operating independently, you shouldn't be sharing your load information across the company then. If I'm an agent or if I'm a branch manager, I should be able to see my loads, and my people should be able to see our loads, but not another branch's loads. Customers, you should be able to know if a customer is being used or not, in my opinion, just so you're not stepping on toes. But you might also have just a company where everyone all works under the same roof and kind of works together, and you probably would just share all that information openly.
It depends.
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, if you're a pod versus like a pod model company where you've got like a dispatching or a coverage department and your sales brokers only do the customer facing thing, I think it's different. Cradle to the grave. Here's some pros and cons. Like the big companies where they're all cradle to the grave, the one I used to, you used to be able to see everyone's customer. I believe they've done away with that because one, what happens is you can also see like the load volume for that customer. You can see a lot of other things, right? Which then like people aren't necessarily okay with that happening because again, like if I've got a customer, I might not have all their locations. I don't need other brokers to know that's my customer. And to be honest, anyone covering my load really just needs to know the load details. They don't necessarily need to know who the customer is either. So I think that like there are definitely ways that you can reduce visibility. I think if it's people covering your loads, they should be able to see all the customers so that they know who they're dealing with. But I don't think other sales brokers really necessarily need to see into other people's books of business. Now, there's some value because when they see other brokers make a lot of money in an industry, it drives interest and it drives a lot of energy in there. So it is a two-edged sword. I mean, it does work both ways. But again, I've also been a victim where somebody's stolen customers from me or like other locations.
I was going to say they could download all the data and take it and steal it. So I think a lot of it comes down to your company's culture and the level of trust you have. Here's an interesting way that I've seen it done in the past is the different I'll call them just branches. The different branches did not share specific details on customers or loads, but they would send out like a monthly ranking of, hey, here's the top 10 branches or whatever this month on load count, or the top 10 branches that set up the most new customers, or the top 10 branches that did the most in gross profit or margin percentage this past month. So you can kind of rate yourself or rank yourself against everybody else, but you're not disclosing too much information where it's, potential for, someone to be dishonest or try to kind of steal someone's business. So,
and it's not as straightforward as that because, and we've talked about this in other episodes, but like a lot of customers have a lot of different offices. Not all of them are under the same legal name. Like some of them are literally considered different companies, but they're really part of your customer. And when other people can see that and they see you're doing well, it might be you have every intention in the world and you just don't have time to get to the other customers because you're doing a lot of business. And like, to me, that's the worst is when somebody else just basically steals your work product after, you've been putting all this time into it just because you're doing what you need to do.
All right, next question. How do I handle a dispute for a late delivery if the dispatcher's story does not match the day or time on the BOL? So load gets delivered, receiver signs the bill lating on whatever day, and I'm assuming what the dispatcher is saying, we delivered on time. That BOL is wrong. I would assume that the dispatcher is probably lying. BOL is a legal document, right? If a BOL is signed clean and there's no damage, and then the receiver tries to say that it is damaged, it gets messy. It gets super messy. But I'm going to take the the receiver's word over the dispatcher. But again, these are subjective situations. So I'm going to try to dig into this as much as possible. One of the things that's probably good practice is when driver calls you and says they're delivered, tell them you need the BOL quickly and verify with your customer, right? You can just shoot off an email. Hey, tracking this has been delivered, all good. Let me know if you have any issues. And if they're like, they're not here yet, right? Mm-hmm. There you go. That's one thing you can do. You got anything else on that one? It sounds like a dispatcher for a carrier that's just trying to not get hit with late fees.
That's pretty much it. I mean, I might make a phone call, but I usually confirm that things are delivered and they were delivered clean after to make sure that I have a record of when I had it confirmed from my point of view.
Shows you're doing your due diligence too. So, last question. Does the freight broker ensure the cargo is covered by the carrier's insurance? Absolutely. So it is our job to make sure that our customer's shipment is being transported on a carrier that has the insurance to cover it, right? So a lot of carriers have $100,000 in cargo insurance. But what if your customer has high-valued shipment that's worth over $100,000? Like maybe they're hauling cars for like brand new cars, right? Maybe there's like 6, I don't know, Chevy Tahoes on there. That's worth a lot more than $100,000, especially right now. Mm-hmm. They got to have auto hauling. They're going to have the right stuff, but it could be that they're moving electronics that are high valued, or it could be maybe it's a product that is excluded from a lot of insurance companies' coverage. Like we've talked about seafood many times, right? it is our job to ensure that that commodity is covered by the carrier's insurance and that the value of it is covered.
Yep.
So, yes.
I mean, shit, even building materials I've seen go over 6 figures this year. I mean, like, there's a lot of things that have, crept up above the 100K mark that typically or historically hadn't been.
Yep. Good episode, man. That's a wrap. I got nothing else. You got anything you want to add in here?
I do not.
I'm looking forward to next week's episode. We haven't had Trey on, and it's been a couple of months. It was earlier.
Yeah.
It was Q1 we had him on, but it'll be good. I'm actually curious to see what his thoughts are with. I'm hoping I could say that, hey, Trey, both of our quarterbacks won the golf tournament last week. So
we shall see. I'm actually looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Any final thoughts, Mr. Kowalski?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Josh Allen in the tournament or the match, and go Bills. That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. If you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.